Hi, welcome to the third video in The Truth About Web Design. So we've seen that web design as a profession has radically changed over the last 20 years. And yesterday we looked at strategy, and I gave you my circuit model, which is for me the most amazing, most powerful strategic tool I've ever used. Today we're going to take another look at what's really changed in the web design business, in the web design profession, and what that means for you and me, and what it means for you if you're a client as well of web design, because the whole landscape has really shifted. And then we're going to start to dig into campaign design. That's the second really crucial step that you've got to do before you even think about rushing into to build anything. So join me for the third video. I know yesterday the video number 2 was a lot to take on board with the circuit. Today's going to be more of the same. I'm going to give you so much information. So my hope is that it's just going to be really, really useful for you. So hope you enjoy it. So let's go with The Truth About Web Design. This is video number 3, and we're looking at designing your marketing campaign. So an important note before we start, really don't want you to watch this until you've watched the first 2 videos. The link to those should be below this, and please make sure you've watched those, because the content in this video is going to make a lot more sense if you do. So what have we learned so far? Well, we've seen that technological advances over the last few years in particular have caused a significant shift in the web design industry, to the point that there is like an extinction event happening right now. Web designers are either going to adapt to survive, or they are going to become extinct, and we're actually seeing that happen now. We've seen that what we used to think mattered doesn't necessarily matter anymore today. And I strongly believe that web design clients, the guys who are providing the funds and the budget, they shouldn't pay for what used to matter, right? They should only pay for what really matters now. So I want to start by looking at quite the stark comparison between the old way of web design and then to compare that to the new way. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who's doing web design today is still doing it in that old way. I'm really comparing it to what I was doing, certainly for the first 10 or 15 years of my career. And here's the thing, there are still some people who are going to be doing it that way, right? And they're the people who really need to get this message and to start reskilling right now. So I want to just compare how we used to allocate time and budget on projects in the old way. We'd start off with some strategy. Now, very often, and all too often, I know clients who are paying 5-figure sums, and where the strategy was nothing more than the agency gives the client a briefing document to complete, or the client just sends over their brief. This is what I want. As though web design has a concrete final deliverable, right? I need a website, I need a web designer, this is what I want, build me that thing, and then it's done. And that's very different really to the way that we think about marketing these days. It's actually a lot more organic, a lot more fluid, and there isn't really any kind of final end point. We're constantly producing, we're constantly learning, testing out new things. So the strategy piece in the old way was just very thin, if it was there at all. And then you'd get 2 massive blocks. It would start with graphic design. We'd decide, we'd do 15 minutes work on information architecture. What did the navigation bar need to have in it? And then we'd fire up Photoshop and we'd be on our way. we'd start with a blank canvas and we'd create all the elements to make something that we, as web designers, like the look of. And we'd send it over to the client for approval. The client may come back with their comments. And then we'd go backwards and forwards. And this would take a long time, quite often weeks. If you were incredibly lucky, you'd get it done in a day. But usually weeks in my experience. Then when that was finally signed off, you'd move into the second big old phase, which was production. Again, it would take an awful long time because we'd be hand building our websites. Even if we're using a CMS, you would still have to go to the Photoshop documents. You'd have to slice these big graphics into smaller graphics so that you could piece them together later on. Over time, we've used fewer and fewer graphics, and that's a great thing, especially since CSS came along. And then, if you had quite a forward-thinking or flexible web designer, you'd do some work on copy as well. But all too often, the copy was a case of sending an email to the client saying, please could you send us the copy for the homepage? Now the problem with all of this is that the graphic design was like done first. So the web designer's job it wasn't really to think about copy in a sense. The web designer would be designing the structure, the frame almost for a website. And the way I talk about that, I have talked about that now for years, is that we used to be designing the box that the stuff came in, right? The box that the content came in. Whereas we should actually be designing the content itself. The structure of a website really should get out of the way, because what really matters is content. The design of your site, the design of your navigation, and the branding area and stuff like that, that isn't the content. That isn't what matters. And that isn't what's going to sell. What's going to sell is the actual message. So now let's compare that to the new way that we've been looking at over the past few videos. So I'm wanting to say we should always start with some research. And that could be, we've actually got a whole kind of course on this coming up where you interview your client's customers to find out what it is that really mattered to them, why they chose the client and what their experience was like. But research really means deeply understanding the target market and not just saying to the client, who's the target audience, right? Give us a persona, give us something to go on. So research is important and deserves a place. Strategy is far more important than we used to think it was, right? Now it's always been important, and the people who understood it were getting it right. But most web designers didn't value it and didn't give it enough time. It just wasn't budgeted for. And part of the reason for all that, guys, is that, as we've been seeing, the design and production elements of a project took so much time and were so costly that we almost felt like, even if we appreciated things like strategy and copywriting, we just didn't feel like we could charge more, because clients were already having to fork out so much money for these artisan skills, these handcrafting of graphic design and production. Following the strategy, maybe slightly more work, arguably, is the campaign plan. That's actually the thing we're going to be looking at later in this video. So strategy, campaign plan. The strategy is, this is what we're going to achieve. This is who we are, this is what our brand is, this is what we're selling, this is who we're selling it to, this is how we understand the problem, so that we know all the facts and we know that all of that stuff lines up. The campaign plan is then the tactical implementation. How are we going to reach those people? How are we going to engage them and sell to them? So we're going to look at all of that in a minute. Next step, graphic design. Look how quick that is today, right? I redesigned my website last weekend and I did it in half a day. But I didn't do the design, right? In the same way that if you redesign your living room, you are not designing. You're not going to make sketches and design the wallpaper yourself and design every stick of furniture yourself and carve them yourself and print them yourself and paint them. You're not going to do that. No, you're going to take your IKEA catalogue and you're going to select the stuff. You're still designing, right? Because what is design? Design is the creation of something new to solve a problem. Design on the web is creating something to solve a communication problem. The client wants to communicate a message, reach people, etc. So that's what web design is. So graphic design really isn't graphic design by hand anymore. And remember, that's coming from somebody who's done 20 years of being proud of my graphic design skills, right? And my ability to slice up websites. But we cannot avoid the facts. The facts are that graphic design is no longer something that marketing web designers should be spending a lot of time on. Production, of course, as well, takes a fraction of the time that it used to take. Yeah, we're still going to have to construct our menus. We're still going to have to say new page and enter the copy on the pages and arrange our promotions and everything else and sign-ins and opt-in forms and all that stuff. That all stuff all still needs to be built, but today we can build it so much quicker than ever before. So production takes a lot less time. And I think that gives us a lot more time for things like copy. So in actual fact, maybe production and copy should be going on at the same time anyway, because what are we doing? We're designing our content. We're writing our content. So excuse the order of those. What happens then after copy? Well, I actually think that these days, when we look at the stuff that matters and when we look at how quickly, cheaply and easily we can publish online, I really think that comparable web design jobs should be at least 25% quicker and 25% cheaper than an equivalent job just 2 or 3 years ago. So, let this kind of sink in. Web design isn't about graphic design and production anymore. Web design is about your strategy, your tactics, rapid implementation, and the copy makes sure that your campaign is rolled out appropriately, that it's right for the market and everything else. So that is, for me, the best representation and the fairest representation of the difference between the old and the new ways that I can come up with. So what does this mean? If you're a web designer, what does this mean for you and me? Well, I really believe now that the majority of graphic design and production that goes on in a website, that's no longer the professional skill of the marketing web designer. But they're effectively assets. But graphic design and production are assets that we buy in. Right? And where do we buy them? We buy them from the people who make the components. So in the same way that if you go to the IKEA catalogue, the IKEA designers design the furniture. You choose the furniture to suit your need. And you drive to the store and you pick it up and you assemble it with your little Allen key, and then you've got your furniture and it's fine and it's fit for purpose. And it costs a fraction of what it would have cost for you to build that thing yourself. And the result is still good enough. Think about it this way as well. For you to say, okay, I need this theme, I need these graphic assets, I need this handful of plugins, that's no different. It's not cheating any more than a building contractor who goes and brings in some machinery to help him get his job done is cheating. Should he stand there with a pickaxe and a shovel for 3 days to dig that hole, or should he go and get a mini digger and bring it in on a trailer and get the job done in 2 hours? So he's using a little bit of the project's budget to hire the machinery, but he's saving days of work by not having to do it manually. And that's this exact same thing that we're doing. Because there are people out there right now, I know, who can produce WordPress themes and templates and, content builders and landing page stuff and graphics that are better than I would probably come up with if I gave myself a week to do it. Maybe a month to do it, right? Why shouldn't I buy that stuff in? It's crazy to build by hand. Unless you are a developer of these tools, in which case, great, that's what you should be doing. And if you love to do that, if you love the challenge of the original graphic design, of the original production, and all the CSS and the cool JavaScript and jQuery, that's what you should be doing. You should not be a marketing web designer if that's what you want to do. So the other major thing that we've realized is that the core marketing skills, and they are strategy, tactics, and also copywriting, are more important than ever. The fact is, guys, they've always been important, but they were overshadowed because we were dazzled by the design and production, right? Those things have always made the difference, but we just didn't know it. And we've learned now. The web's 20 years old. It's grown up now, right? It's got its own place. It's got its own job. It now needs to earn its way. So there's another problem as well that's come out of all this, which is that the industry is continually fragmenting. There are so many specialisms now because there are so many different channels that we can use for reaching people. There are so many different tactics that people have developed for interacting with people. A few years ago, it really wasn't that easy to publish an ebook and to build an email list, right? But nowadays, you can do this in minutes. You can have all of that stuff set up in minutes. The CRM tools that we've got are amazing, right? But all of this flexibility brings with it complexity. And when you get complexity, you get specializing. So now, is there any such thing as an online marketer, who does online marketing? People are tending to specialize, and that brings its own problems as well. So I believe that today, web projects should actually be run by one person who understands and is responsible for the big picture. If you remember in the first video, we said if you bring in a team of specialists, right, you've got somebody who's responsible for SEO and somebody who's responsible for pay-per-click and somebody who's responsible for conversion optimization, and you've got your own web designer and a copywriter, who's in charge of what goes on a page? Who's in charge of the content? Who is responsible ultimately for how well stuff works? Too many cooks spoil the broth. And I really think that we need to be marketers. A web designer, the old-fashioned webmaster, in a way, is one person that you can go to and say, I want to achieve this. I want sales. I want leads. Give me new customers. And they are then in control of the whole thing. So what is the big picture? That's getting the strategy right and implementing it, rolling the strategy out. And that person, the broad-skilled marketer, should know when and how to use external resources. And by external resources, we mean assets that you can buy, like themes, platforms, and all those other resources, landing pages, and the tools for CRM and mailing list management. You need to be aware of all that stuff. And you also need to be aware of human skills, those different specialties that you don't possess yourself. And it's a wise person who knows the limitations of their own ability. I went for years thinking that I actually had the complete toolkit for creating, publishing, and running successful websites. because I could code and I could design and I could hack them all together. But the fact of the matter is that over those years, it's just got too much. Nobody can do it all now. So it's a smart person, it's a wise person who knows that if they need a pay-per-click campaign, they know who to speak to, right? So you may be aware of this concept called the T-shaped marketer. It's worth looking up. But basically what the T-shaped marketer is it says that all online marketers today should have a broad understanding of everything that's possible, right? All the tools and tactics that are available to us, and suggest that you should specialize in one particular area. What I'm saying is that I think we also need people who are just broad. You've got the broad strip, the top of the T, and that we specialize in strategy and tactics. We specialize in marketing, right? And also copywriting, horrendously important. So, can the person who's in charge of a project be the client? Well, I think sometimes they can, but generally it's not a good idea. I have seen it work when it's the right client. There are some clients who have the right mentality and kind of personality to do it, but there's always this significant risk of losing perspective. It's very hard, I believe, to do your own marketing day in, day out. It takes a certain type of personality to do it. It's a lot easier to bring in somebody else or to have somebody else who's responsible for that. And as well, keeping up with all of the choices and the tactics and the channels is actually a full-time job. So how can you run a business and keep on top of all the marketing? That's a real problem today. If not more than full-time, right? It may not be possible for even one person just to keep on top of everything that's out there. So, we're just facing facts here, right? So, in the last video, when we're thinking about the key skills that we need to be developing. The last video we covered the essentials of strategy. So what about tactical implementation, rolling out your campaign? If you know who you're marketing to, you know what they want, what their problems are, you know that you've got a great basis of a proposition, your products and services fit, and it's all in line with your brand and who you are. If you've got all that down and you know it's all aligned, how do you actually roll it out? How do you reach those people? So now we're going to look at campaign design. Now, another problem. As we've said, there's so many more tactics and channels today than there have ever been before. How on earth do you choose? Now, I've started an exercise this year of analyzing, collecting all the different channels, and channels, I mean things like pay-per-click, email, Facebook pay-per-click, LinkedIn organic, LinkedIn groups. I've analyzed 43 different channels and 34 major tactics. So these are ways, methods of approaching people using those channels, right? Just in the last few months alone. So how can you possibly figure out which one's the right one for you? And I've identified 4 very common mistakes that, and it's likely that we all fall into at least one of these categories, right? First one is to hire a one-trick pony. So this is very common today, and it's a byproduct of the fact that we've had to specialize because the market has become so diffuse with so many different choices there, right? People are specializing. So somebody might go to a web designer who has an interest in Facebook ads, or somebody may say, I'm going to speak to a conversion specialist, or they might go to a pay-per-click specialist. Now, you've heard the phrase, when the only tool you've got is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail, right? Who's to blame? If you go to a pay-per-click guy and say, I want you to help me make more sales, They're going to roll out a pay-per-click campaign for you. Now, if that doesn't work, whose fault is it? Really, whose fault is it? I can't answer that question. If you go to a conversion specialist, in fact, I worked for a client recently. They approached me. They said, Ben, we want you to improve our conversion rates. And I worked with them for a couple of months, and I kept saying to them, I think you've got a branding problem. I really think you need to look at your branding, And they didn't want to look at their branding. They wanted their conversion rates to be improved. But how could I improve their conversion rates, without addressing the whole thing? We need to be, in a way, holistic about this. So hiring a one-trick pony and saying, do this for me, you're going to get what they do, and it may work and it may not, right? Along with that goes be a one-trick pony. And this happens if you are in the pay-per-click world or the web design world, or you're a WordPress person. You go to a WordPress producer and say, I need this kind of site. They're going to try and build it in WordPress because that's what they do. And it's not their fault that they're a specialist. So, the same thing can also apply if you're a client. I know business owners who have mastered AdWords, but then AdWords changes over time. If AdWords may have worked for you in 2011, but may not work for you now that the market has become a lot more saturated. It may be that LinkedIn advertising or Twitter advertising or Facebook organic social marketing could actually be more applicable and more appropriate for your context. So you need to keep broad. You need to keep your knowledge expanding. You need to keep your mind open, right? The problem then, of course, is that it takes a lot of time. So what's the third problem? Trying every new thing that comes along, right? Oh, Jeff Walker's released a course on product launches, right? We're now all going to start doing product launches. Frank Kern's released a course on, mass conversion. Let's all do it Frank's way. Let's all do what Brendan Burchard is doing, right? We've already seen there's a massive industry of people who earn their money by selling you the next best thing and saying that it's going to cure all your ills. It probably isn't going to cure all your ills. The channels and the tactics that are right for you are the channels and the tactics that are right for you. I can't tell you what they are. Frank and Brendan and Jeff can't tell you what they are, because it's all down to the strategy and the context of your business and what you want to do. Or in the case of your clients, the same thing. So trying every new thing, all that's going to do is empty your bank account really fast. It's going to take all your time, right? So, and that's then going to leave you no time either to run your own business if you're a business owner, or really to be able to advise clients properly if you're constantly chasing the latest shiny thing. But then the flip side of that one is not trying at all. To say, there's far too many things going on. I'm just going to stick something on the web and sit and pray that somebody finds it. And obviously that's not going to work either. So, really you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't these days in so many ways. So what can we do? It's almost a no-win situation. It's actually practically impossible to map out all the options and to give the right tactics for each project's context. There's an infinity of possibilities out there. And I can't give you, in this video at least, a comprehensive step-by-step guide, but I am actually working on a comprehensive step-by-step guide. I can't tell you any more about that today. So, let's break it down. At the simplest level, what does a campaign need to do? Well, it needs to select the right channels to use to reach your audience, right? So channels are content marketing, SEO, pay-per-click, all Facebook, social, all the ways that you can connect with people, all right? So you need to reach them first of all. Then you need tactics to engage with those people, engage them in conversation. And then you've got to keep the conversation going so that you can communicate all the reasons why they need what you're offering and to resolve all the objections. Now, that conversation may last a few minutes, or because that's all it takes for them to be convinced that, yeah, this is what I need, I'm going to pull out my credit card right now. Or it may take days or weeks or months. And if you remember, as we saw when we were looking at the circuit yesterday, and some of those questions those key questions that I shared with you were actually aimed at highlighting those important factors about the scenario, the way that things are, so that it could help you to guide those choices of how you engage with people and how you keep the conversation going and how long you're going to need to do it in order to get them to that point where they're convinced. So those are the fundamental tasks. Got to reach them, engage them, continue that conversation until you can sell. But fortunately, we can break them down further in a way that makes campaign design more feasible. So here's what I can give you today. I'm going to give you another structure that can guide what objectives you need to achieve in your campaign and in what order. So that should also make it easier for you to filter down those options, the options about how you achieve them. Okay, so we're going to filter it by, this is what you should be doing at this stage, this is what you need to do next, this is what you need to achieve. And then the number of choices of how you go about that should be reduced to a more manageable level. So I've analysed 16 major marketing objectives and another 12 minor ones that we don't need to go into right now. But I'm going to give you these 16 major marketing objectives. And the great news is, I've mapped these objectives to the awareness steps that we looked at before. And what that does is it helps us to focus on the right channels and the right tactics to use. Okay, so let's quickly just recap on those awareness steps that we mentioned before. Starts at step 0. And if you think about your market and do a little bit of research, you should be able to identify where the majority of your market is. Have you got a step 0 market who may have a problem, but it's not conscious? They're not thinking about it. They don't care about it, right? They're not looking for a solution for it. Now, if you've got a step 0 market, which meaning that most of the people who may need what you've got don't even know they've got a problem, we know they're not looking. So what that means is that you've got to reach out to them. You've got to go and meet them where they are. So it means that, as we've already said, for example, search network on AdWords is out of the question because they're not typing into Google. But they may be on Facebook. Are they on Facebook? Depends on the kind of mode of what it is that you're offering, for example. Or it may be that magazine articles could work really well, or guest blogs. Right? Anything that people are just going to come across as part of their daily life. And the goal of what you're doing at step 0 is to say, do you have this problem? Like the old classic ads, do you make this mistake? Do you make these mistakes in English? Right? So it's catching people and saying to them, do you have this problem? And they think, oh, maybe I do. I'm going to read on, right? Next step is that you become aware of the problem. So this is a logical sequence of steps. You're aware of the problem, but you're not yet aware that solutions exist. Step 2 is that you are aware that solutions exist, but obviously you don't have a preferred solution because you're still in the market. Otherwise, using that logic we were talking about before, you're not going to buy if you've already got a preferred solution, so you're not actually in the market anyway. So we can ignore those people. Step 3 is that they now become aware of your solution, but not particularly aware of why it's the right one for them, until you get them to step 4 when they're aware of its benefits to them. Step 5 is they are convinced that it's the right one for them, so this is the point of being ready to buy. And we've also now, I'm working with a step 6 as well. After they've bought, they're now part of your gang, they're part of your tribe, they're a follower or a customer. So that's the awareness steps. Everybody who is in the market for what it is that you sell is on this awareness ladder at some point. Generally, you'll find that most people are at step 0, 1 or 2, because most people don't already know about your offering unless you've got a generic brand. Okay, so what I'm going to talk you through now is those 16 major objectives, things that you need to be achieving at different points in your marketing campaign. And we're going to align them with awareness steps. So hold on to your hats. So we're going to do it 2 pages. Let's look at the first 8 now. So the first one is to enlist the project, the prospect. I cannot overemphasize the importance of this. In the old days, only, going back about three years or so, I published Convert in 2011, and what that did was, what was revolutionary about that book is it was saying that we need to be arranging our web content around the awareness ladder steps so that you create step 3 content, step 2 content, step 1 content, right? Step 0 content, and that content then works together and filters people and feeds them in to the subsequent steps so that you're giving people the content that is appropriate for them where they are. Okay, and it gives you a highly efficient way to think about structuring your content and what you do. Today, I'm saying we should go further than that, because web content generally is naturally passive. People will come across it, they'll either stay and read it, or they'll click away and do something else. We know that people who are, for example, part of your Facebook group, or people who follow you on Twitter, or they're in a LinkedIn group, or if they're on a mailing list, even better, they are enlisted in some way. They are already following you in some way, or they've expressed some kind of interest. So you need to imagine your circles of influence spreading out, right? Getting further away and progressively weaker. But we should always be trying to enlist people wherever they are. So why not have a Facebook group for people who have the problem that you solve, right? Why not have a mailing list for people who are thinking, they know they've got a problem, they're at step 2, and they're trying to decide which solution is best for them? Why not have a mailing list for them? And then when you've talked them through the pros and cons of various things and you've presented to them your preferred solution, then you move them from that step 2 mailing list to a step 3 mailing list automatically. As that's the kind of smart use of mailing lists and social media that we're starting to look at now. So enlisting the project, what awareness steps would be appropriate for that? Well, basically, it's practically at every level, possibly not so much step 0, right? But until somebody is already a customer or a follower of yours, then you should be thinking, always thinking, how can I not just give them some web content and stand back and hope they like it, but to get them to put their email address in, get them to follow a particular Twitter feed or Facebook page or Facebook group. Incredibly important, because once you've got people's permission and you've got their attention in that way, that gives you a far more effective and efficient way to market to them, to reach to them, to have that conversation with them. Emphasizing the problem and its cost, right? The impact of the problem. This is something that you pretty much do at step 0 and step 1, right? Step 0 people, do you have bad breath, right? Do you find that people blah, 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 okay? And at step 1, so you've got bad breath, isn't it distressing when blah, 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 or, does your partner snore, or whatever it may be. These are things that you need to, if you've got a step 0 and step 1 market, first thing you need to be doing is focusing on the problem and the cost of the problem and the cost of doing nothing about the problem. Okay? You cannot say to somebody, do you have bad breath? There's 30% off my patented blah, 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 right? Because there's a huge gulf there. There's a huge chasm between where they are thinking, do people respond to me in that way? And you saying that obviously you want to buy my thing. They don't know about your thing. They don't know that it exists, right? They don't know why it's the right thing for them, why it's better than any other option. They're still stuck there thinking, oh, do I have this problem? Okay? So you can see how by narrowing down what we need to be doing when we are talking to people at each level of awareness, it actually makes life a lot easier. It means you don't need to be thinking about different channels and different ways of reaching, because some of those options just aren't going to be appropriate. Now, how about visualizing the outcome in their life? This is the flip side. Remember we were talking about, when we were looking at the proposition in the circuit, one of the things about the proposition is, what is the promised outcome? And getting people to visualize the outcome, particularly in the context of a story, something that actually gets them to use their imagination, can be really powerful. And that's actually something that you can use all the way from step 1 through step 5. Right? It doesn't apply at step 0, because someone at step 0 is not yet aware that they've got a problem. So why should they be picturing the outcome? Right? First, you have to identify the problem or the opportunity. Acknowledging other existing solutions is something that only happens at step 1, logically. Right? You say, you could try this method. You could try surgery. You could try pharmaceutical drugs. Right? Lots of people have used this, but there's serious health concerns about those things. So acknowledging other existing solutions is only for people who now realize they have a problem, right? And then you can acknowledge that there are options. Because once you've told them that there are options, they are automatically at step 2, right? Gathering objections can happen at step 1, 2, or 3. So once you start talking to people, why you can explore, why might you not want to do something, or what's stopping you from. There's a lots of ways of exploring and uncovering the reasons why maybe they haven't taken action yet, or if they're at step 3 and you've told them what your product is, what would be stopping them from pursuing that further. Okay, but in general, this is a major outcome. Gathering objections is something that we should consciously and deliberately be building into our campaigns. Discrediting the alternatives. Okay, now obviously this can only happen from step 2, so it's literally just the step 2 objective. So someone's at step 2, they're aware that there are options. Now what you need to do is lay landmines for those options. If they're not appropriate, then they're not right. Just think about Bill Betts, who he was suffering from carpal tunnel syndrome, really chronic, and he was faced with having major surgery on one wrist, and then 6 weeks later having the same surgery on the other wrist, because it would have knocked him out of action for 6 weeks either way, so he needed 2 hands. And possibly facing the prospect of being on drugs for the rest of his life to deal with this, right? He wasn't happy with that. He was at step 2. He realized there were solutions, surgery and drugs, and he wasn't happy with that. So that's like the clearest definition of a step 2 thing. That's why when somebody came along to Bill and said, hey, how about Tai Chi and Qigong? You could heal yourself from this thing. He jumped at the chance because it matched what he was about and what he wanted. This is really useful one. Setting up the criteria for the best solution. And by the best solution, we mean that the solution that you're going to present. Okay? Now, this happens also at step 2. It doesn't apply at step 1. Right? Step 1, what are you doing? You're emphasizing the problem. And you can then acknowledge other solutions. Now, when you say that obviously, go back to Bill's case, right? Surgery isn't ideal because spending a lifetime popping pills isn't ideal because living with it, because there's always an alternative of doing nothing, right? And emphasize why living with it isn't acceptable either. So what do we need? We need a way that you can cure yourself of this thing without these things, that's natural, that's proven as being practiced maybe for thousands of years, right? I haven't said what it is, but I've set up what it looks like. And when you do that, then when you present your solution, if you create the checklist, okay, here's the checklist for what a great solution looks like, and here's the great solution, right? Oh, look, it ticks all the things on the checklist. That's great, perfect, right? It's a great way to warm people up and get them ready to be warm, to be open to the proposition that you're going to make to them. And then, of course, you introduce the better solution, right? Discredit the alternatives, say what the ideal solution looks like, and then you introduce yours. And when you do that, the prospect moves on to step 3 in the awareness ladder. So let's look at what happens next. So once you've presented your solution, obviously you need to reinforce all the positive reasons why it makes sense for them and all the benefits that they can expect in their life, right? We already looked at visualizing the outcome, but now what we're saying is, here's how, right? This is the definition of a proposition. This is how this solution that I'm giving you will help you to realize that dream, that better life, right? And you can do this and should keep doing this at steps 3, 4, and 5, right? Keep reminding them, even if they're practically ready to buy, keep reminding them why they should buy. And people can sit at step 5 and never bother to take action because you just need a bit of momentum. So keep giving them all those benefits. And that's why we when we're doing the strategic planning before, you've got to list all of those benefits down. What does this mean in your life? How is your life going to be better? List every single one, because if you use those, then you're covering every angle. Evidence, again, we talked about this before. It's important to gather this. Now we're going to use it. Evidence of why your proposition is the ideal one. Again, step 3, 4, and 5. Resolving the negatives and handling the objections, right? I'm going to take action only when the benefit that I can expect clearly outweighs the cost to me, right? So there might be negatives, there might be perceived costs, risks, doubt, fear, right? That's all of those things we call objections. So know what those are. It's really important. You can't just focus on the light. You've got to appreciate the shadow side as well. Gather that, interview people, find out what those objections are so that you can resolve them. And sometimes it's a case of handling those objections can then result in a sale. Again, step 3, 4, and 5. We need to do it when we present our solution, and when they are convinced of the benefits, we keep doing it and keep going until they actually buy. Proving value also, particularly obviously value for money. But just proving it. This is why it's worth it. This is why you should do it. Step 3, 4, and 5. Risk reversal. So all of these things we're looking at trying to tip that balance, right? And risk reversal is a great one. Risk reversal means that if you proceed with this, you're doing it at no risk. I'm taking on the risk. So for example, you might say there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. If at any time you don't think it's right for you, just send it back in the post and I will give you a complete refund and refund your postage, right? That's classic risk reversal. And there's any number of other ways of doing the same thing. Again, step 3, 4, 5. Scarcity and urgency. We looked at both of these when we were analyzing the problem and also the proposition, right? Is the product scarce, right? If I'm only offering 2 hours per week for coaching, that's scarcity, right? Last few left, right? Shop closing down, everything must go by Saturday, right? That's all scarcity stuff. It's always all saying there is a window of opportunity and that window is not going to stay open for very long. And scarcity creates urgency, right? Anything that you can do to do these. You don't really want to introduce those at step 3 when you've just told people about your solution, because you've got to convince them of the benefits. You've got to convince them that they want it before you can say, give them a call to action, right? But scarcity and urgency, really, really powerful at steps 4 and 5. You've got to introduce a final call to action. Now, it may seem blindingly obvious, but this is something that so many websites, so many marketers fail to do, is to say, here's what I want you to do. Click the button, schedule a call, make an appointment, buy it now, right? If you don't like it, send it back, but buy it now. Right? It's like dating somebody for 5 years and never popping the damn question. Pop the question already. Get down on one knee and say, how about it? Let's do this. If you don't do it, how can they say yes? Right? If you do it, yes, they might say no. But if you don't, you can't ever get a yes. And then the final one of the major objectives, reassuring people about the purchase they've just made. This is step 6, after they've bought, after they are now officially one of your customers, one of your followers. Reassure them about the purchase. Right? So we're trying to prevent what we call buyer's remorse. Okay? So congratulations, you have just taken a big step, right? You've got this product, you can now enjoy using it, and make them feel good about it, right? And remind them that there are support networks available. Remind them of all the other great things that they're going to enjoy, right? Even after they've bought. All good stuff. So that's my objectives matrix. Now, I want you to use that. At the very least, use it as a checklist to make sure that you cover all of those objectives in every campaign that you do. Look at your website, right? Look at your content. Do you have content that's targeting those awareness steps, right? Have you got an email sequence where particular messages are targeting awareness steps? And do you do all of those things? And if not, why not? Can you fit them in? Make room for it. So let's just recap then what we've seen in this series. We've seen how the shift in web design has changed the skills that we need to use today and the way that we need to deliver those skills. I've given you the circuit to help you clarify your strategy, plus I've given you the objectives matrix to help you guide your campaign design. Now, if you agree that the web design sector has already changed radically, and if you want to really master the skills that you're going to need in order to thrive in the new way, just look out. I'm going to send you another video tomorrow. Look out for that video, and I'll explain a lot more then. But thank you very much for watching this series. I really implore you just to use it. Start to put it into practice today in your work, with your own website, whatever you do. Thank you very much for giving me the time to share this stuff with you. I feel really passionate about it, and I hope you do now as well.